I'm a 30-year-old woman named Caroline, and for the last decade, I've been the lone single person at every family gathering. Each Christmas, someone inevitably brought it up. One year, an aunt quipped that the only ring I'd ever have was the one on my phone screen. Another time, my dad thought it was funny to give me a spinster survival kit, a fuzzy bathrobe, knitting yarn, and chamomile tea. Everyone chuckled. I managed a weak grin. That was the pattern. My younger sister, Ellie, is married with 2 kids and lives a short walk from our parents in Pennsylvania. She's the type who shares meticulously arranged lunchbox photos and vacation posts with motivational quotes. My older brother, Dylan, lives in New York, working in finance. He's only engaged when food or football is involved. I'm the only one who left the nest, moving far away. I live in Boston, working as a graphic designer for a publishing house. Every time I visited home, I steeled myself. Ellie would ramble about her kids, calling motherhood the toughest job ever. My mom would slip in a remark about how quiet my holidays must be. And someone, usually Ellie, would toss out a jab like, even the plainest cereal gets picked eventually. The family would laugh. I'd fake it. My love life became their recycled punchline, like reused gift wrap. I tried addressing it once. I told my mom it stung. She dismissed it, saying teasing was how we showed affection. When I asked Ellie to stop, she called me oversensitive and said I was blowing it out of proportion. After that, I quit mentioning it. I stopped bringing anyone home altogether. The truth? I wasn't single because I couldn't find someone. I just didn't want to bring anyone into that atmosphere. It felt like inviting someone I cared about to a dinner where they'd be ridiculed on arrival. So I kept my relationships private, brief, or both. It was simpler that way. Then, 8 months ago, I met Alec. He's 33, a trauma surgeon. We crossed paths at a design conference. He was there with a friend speaking on medical interfaces. I was there for work. We ended up chatting over coffee while waiting for our trains, and the conversation never stopped. What began as a casual exchange turned into daily messages, weekend trips, and late-night calls. He wasn't just charming or good-looking. He was steady. I could share a stressful work deadline, and he'd follow up later to see how it went. Once, after a big client presentation, he sent flowers to my office. No note, just a smiley face scribbled on the receipt. With Alec, everything felt equal. He valued my career, didn't just tolerate it. He respected my independence and never made me feel I had to dim myself to fit his life. I'd been called a lot to handle before. Alec called me remarkable. We discussed everything: marriage, finances, timelines, kids. We were in sync from the start. 6 months in, we got engaged. No grand gesture. We were eating takeout on the floor, talking about moving in together, and decided it was time to make it official. I didn't tell my family. Not because I was hiding him. I just didn't want him to become their next joke. I wanted this to stay ours, free from their snide remarks or backhanded comments. I knew they'd find out eventually. I just wanted to choose the moment. That brings me to this year. Christmas at my parents' house. Dylan would fly in from New York, Ellie and her family would already be there, and my parents would be preparing their usual roast. The difference? I wasn't arriving alone. Alec was flying in on the 23rd. I'd wrapped the gifts, thoughtful items we'd chosen together. I packed my ring box, not to flaunt it but because I was done hiding. I'd rehearsed everything in my mind, what I'd tolerate, what I wouldn't. If someone made a jab, I wouldn't brush it off. If they downplayed the engagement, I wouldn't explain myself. I wasn't going to start a fight, but I wasn't there to make anyone comfortable at my expense. Ellie would likely have her slideshow ready, Aspen vacation photos, updates about her eldest learning Spanish, maybe a kitchen remodel thrown in. I knew the drill. But this time, I wasn't the sidekick to someone else's spotlight. I was arriving with Alec, not as a prize, not as evidence. Just as myself, confident, secure, and not seeking approval. This year, when I walked through that door, I wouldn't be the family's running gag. No gentle introductions, no long justifications. Just me, Alec, and a quiet certainty that whatever they thought or said couldn't touch what we had. We arrived at my parents' place just after 3 p.m. on Christmas Eve. A light snow was falling, the kind that swirls but doesn't settle. Alec carried the presents while I opened the door. Ellie answered it. She held a half-empty wine glass, dressed in a cream sweater and pressed jeans. Her eyes flicked from me to Alec, then back. Her smile was late and didn't reach her eyes. "You brought a guest?" She stepped aside, framing it as a question, not a welcome. Alec nodded politely and walked in. The living room smelled of cinnamon and roasted meat. The decorations were unchanged, the same wreath from a decade ago, the same stockings with our names in red felt. My parents emerged from the kitchen. My mom's voice hit a pitch too high when she said hello. My dad sized Alec up, face, shoes, then offered a quick handshake. No one commented on my not being alone. For the first time in 10 years, no one made a quip about my solo status. But there was no warmth in its place. Just quiet. Dylan arrived 20 minutes later, dropped his bag, and hugged me. He glanced at Alec, gave a nod of approval. Alec introduced himself. My dad disappeared to check the oven. Ellie passed by, refilling her glass without a word. We sat for dinner at 6. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, glazed carrots, canned cranberry sauce. Alec praised the food, asked about the recipe. My mom muttered something about an old cookbook she couldn't recall. Ellie cut in, asking Alec about his job. When he said trauma surgeon, her eyebrows shot up. She followed with, "So you're fine with someone as independent as Caroline?" Alec didn't hesitate. He said that was what he admired most about me. I didn't wait for someone to offer me space. I took it. No hesitation. No sarcasm. Just a direct response. Ellie stayed silent. After dessert, store-bought apple pie and decaf coffee, I stood and announced our engagement. No fanfare. No flashing the ring. Just a statement between bites. Dylan spoke first, grinning and saying congrats as he leaned back. That seemed to prompt the others. My mom nodded slowly. My dad mumbled about needing more wine. Ellie said nothing. She stared at her pie like it had offended her. My mom asked how long we'd been together. Before I could answer, Ellie said, "This feels sudden, doesn't it?" I clarified we'd been dating 8 months, spending nearly every weekend together, aligned on major life goals. It wasn't rushed. Just private until now. Ellie tilted her head. Looks don't last. Hope there's more to him than that. Alec grinned and said he hoped so too. Then he asked Dylan if he needed help with the dishes. The talk shifted to weather, jobs, the cost of flights. It felt scripted, like lines that didn't quite connect. After dinner, while I loaded the dishwasher, Dylan pulled me aside. He said Alec seemed solid. Admitted he didn't think I'd find someone who could match my pace and still seem so calm. Said he was glad to be wrong. I thanked him and handed him a damp plate. I noticed my mom watching from the hallway. She beckoned me over and asked if Alec had a past. Her voice lowered on the word, like it carried a secret. I said no. No ex-wives. No hidden kids. No issues. She nodded but didn't press further. Just walked away, like she'd settled a question she hadn't asked. Alec and I went to the guest room around 10 that he tucked our bags in the closet while I folded clothes for the next day. I offered him a drink, something strong. But he declined and sat on the bed's edge. He said this was familiar. Families like this, they challenge you. It starts with polite nods and ends with subtle power games. He wasn't upset, just noting it. Then he asked where the extra blanket was. I pointed to the bottom drawer and switched off the light. I didn't need to explain anything. I didn't need to justify anyone either. For once, I wasn't caught between sides, trying to keep things civil. Alec was calm, unshaken, and didn't waver once. That night, the quiet outside matched the house inside. But for the first time, I wasn't facing it alone. Christmas morning was loud, chaotic, and cluttered, as always. Wrapping paper scattered everywhere, coffee brewing endlessly, and Ellie's youngest zooming around the table in new robot slippers. Alec came downstairs, dressed, alert, carrying a stack of neatly wrapped gifts. He handed them out quietly, no fuss. He gave my dad a rare, out-of-print book on Pennsylvania Dutch cooking. Dad flipped through it, lingered on the canning section, and said it reminded him of his mom's recipes. That was the most authentic he'd been all weekend. For my mom, Alec gave a hand-poured soy candle, its scent somehow matching the living room's decor. She unwrapped it carefully, said it was too nice, then placed it on the mantel without repacking it. That was her way of approving. Ellie opened her gift from her husband, a standard spa gift card. She gave a quick thumbs up, then glanced over as her son unwrapped a vibrant chemistry set from Alec. She looked from the gift to Alec, as if wondering how he knew her kids' interests. Alec sat on the floor with the kids, helping them assemble a Lego City train. He didn't dominate or show off, just read the manual while the boys clicked pieces together. Ellie's husband stayed in the corner, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, barely glancing up. My mom passed by once to refill Alec's cup before he asked. She returned with a scone, then another. Then she laughed, too loudly, when he joked about the Lego figures having better transit than most cities. It didn't feel like she was warming to him. It felt like she was reassessing, like she'd misjudged him and was now trying to catch up. During brunch, things were quiet until Ellie said, "Guess waiting till 30 paid off after all." No one laughed. Dylan shifted the topic to Alec's hospital hours. My dad picked it up, asking about med school, residency, and ER shifts. That kept things normal for a bit. But then my dad added, "Didn't think someone like you would pick our Caroline." No offense. Alec smiled and said, "I'm the lucky one." No hesitation, no edge. Just clean and final. Later, I pulled my dad aside while pouring drinks and told him next time, a simple congratulations would do. He nodded and offered to cut the pie, like that settled it. In the kitchen, while rinsing plates, I overheard my mom talking quietly to Ellie. "Men like that don't usually stay." Ellie didn't sound amused or upset when she replied, "Well, he proposed. So she must have done something right." She didn't glance over. Just grabbed a cookie from the counter and walked back to the living room. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their words showed exactly where they stood. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fix it or reply. At lunch, Alec shared a story from his early residency, a light-hearted tale about a hospital food drive, a mix-up with addresses, and a neighborhood that ended up hosting an impromptu block party. It was funny, concise, and drew everyone in. Even my dad laughed. Dylan asked for more details. My mom asked where it happened. Ellie didn't cut in or steer the conversation elsewhere. I leaned back and listened. Nobody was interrupting me. Nobody was dissecting me. For once, I wasn't framed as a puzzle or a work in progress. No one brought up my single status, my habits, or how my career supposedly clashed with family life. That night, I slipped under the quilt in the guest room. Alec was scrolling on his phone next to me. The house had finally settled into silence. I realized the old joke, the one that had trailed me year after year, had faded. Not because they'd matured. Not because they suddenly valued me. But because Alec's presence shifted the dynamic. He wasn't loud or showy. But he didn't back down either. And because of him, for the first time in 10 years, I didn't have to either. The next morning, Alec and I strolled through the neighborhood. The snow hadn't settled, but the sky was gray, and the streets were hushed. We passed houses with wreaths on doors and inflatable snowmen in yards. Alec noted that something felt slightly off. Not overt. Just a little out of sync. I told him affection in my family often came with strings attached. He didn't press for details. When we returned, Ellie was alone in the kitchen, slicing carrots with unnecessary force. She glanced up and said Mom and Dad had gone to visit a neighbor. On Christmas morning. No one had mentioned it. Alec offered to step out for a call. He went to the living room while I set a kettle on. Ellie stood there, staring. Then she asked if this whole trip was a stunt to me. Like I'd brought Alec to make a point. I said no, he's my fiancé. That's the story. If I wanted to make a statement, I could have been much louder. She didn't let up. Said I always had it easy. I got attention without effort. Meanwhile, she had to perfect everything, marriage, kids, the house, just to be seen. None of it got her praise. But I show up with a guy, and suddenly everyone's quiet, watching. I didn't respond. There was no reply that wouldn't spark another argument. She continued. Said our parents treated my dating life like it was the family's main event. Every breakup was a crisis. Every guy was a headline. Meanwhile, her wedding barely got a scrapbook. She didn't apologize. Just said her comments over the years came from pent-up resentment. I didn't engage. I poured my tea, nodded, and left. Alec glanced up when I rejoined him but didn't ask questions. He could read the situation without me spelling it out. Soon after, my mom returned and immediately asked Alec if he'd help carve the turkey. That was new. My dad had never let anyone else near the knife, not even Dylan. Alec didn't pause. He followed her to the kitchen like it was routine. I watched from the hallway. She handed him the carving fork like it was a relay race. My dad stood to the side, observing but not intervening. The shift was subtle but obvious. They were recalibrating, not embracing, not welcoming, just adjusting their stance. Dylan walked by and said he couldn't remember Mom acting that way with anyone else. He teased that Alec must have cracked the family's code in less than 2 days. At dinner, things seemed calmer on the surface. No jabs, no quips. But when Alec passed the green beans, my mom asked how he could afford such thoughtful gifts. She smiled, but her tone betrayed her, not curiosity, unease. Alec didn't waver, just said, I pay attention when Caroline talks about the people she cares about. Then he handed the rolls to Dylan without breaking eye contact. The room stilled for a moment. No one pressed further. And for once, I didn't rush to fill the quiet. I let it linger. Around 4 p.m. the day after Christmas, I walked into the kitchen to the scent of thyme-roasted chicken and my mom humming like she was auditioning for a cooking channel. I noticed 2 extra place settings on the table. Before I could ask, she casually said Angela and her husband were coming for dinner. No heads up. No context. Just tossed out like a forgotten ingredient. Angela wasn't just a family acquaintance. Growing up, she was the polished, perfect girl whose mom was my mother's closest friend. She had ballet recitals, flawless calligraphy, and a shelf of awards. Every time Angela visited, my mom would start sentences with, "You know what Angela's up to now," and end with a milestone I didn't care to hear. They arrived just past 5. Angela walked in wearing a fitted jacket and heels too sleek for snow. She glanced at my ring, smiled, and said, "Oh, it's daintier than I pictured." Her husband stood behind her with a stiff smile, already surveying the room. Dinner began politely. Until Angela's husband leaned toward Alec and asked if being with someone as self-sufficient as me ever made balancing life tricky. Alec didn't hesitate, said he never had to keep up because we moved as a team. Then he passed the roles without missing a beat. Angela tried again, asking Alec about hospital life. Then pivoting to whether it left him enough time for a relationship like ours. She didn't define what "like ours" meant, but it lingered in the air. Ellie, surprisingly, stayed quiet. She didn't nod along, didn't chime in, just observed. It clicked after the third pointed question. Angela wasn't there by accident. My mom had invited her hoping her husband would outshine Alec. It was a comparison dinner, and we were the unannounced competitors. Alec didn't take the bait. He smiled, gave concise answers, never defensive. Angela kept probing, but never landed a blow. When she asked how I managed to catch someone like him, I said, mutual respect. Groundbreaking, right? Angela's face didn't falter, but she asked for her coat 10 minutes later and said they had an early drive. She barely said goodbye, and her husband didn't finish his drink. After they left, my mom said Angela was probably just caught off guard. Then she added, "You two seem unexpected together." Like she was retracting a comment she hadn't fully made. I told her firmly, "That's the last time I'm blindsided like that." She blinked, lips parted, but didn't argue. Dylan, holding a half-empty wine glass, clapped twice and said, "Finally." Then he laughed, and for once, so did everyone else. That night, Alec said I handled it flawlessly, never giving her the drama she wanted. He said that took more strength than arguing. We sat on the sofa, split the last piece of pie, and didn't say much more. When I went to bed, I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt steady. Like I hadn't bent, not once. The morning after Angela's visit, the house felt different. Not warm, but lighter. No one was muttering in corners or pretending not to watch each other. The tension that had hung heavy since Alec and I arrived was still there, but stretched thin, like it had lost its spark. My mom started storing the holiday plates, while my dad took down the porch lights. Ellie surprised me by appearing beside the tree with a storage box, asking if I needed help. No one prompted her. She just joined me as I packed ornaments and untangled strands of lights. We worked quietly for a few minutes before Ellie said she might have been too sharp over the years. It wasn't an apology, just a comment. I said we didn't need a big reconciliation moment. We could just be decent. She nodded and kept separating hooks from tinsel. No big embrace, no heartfelt stares, no soft music swelling. Just us, putting away decorations without bickering, and honestly, that was plenty. Over lunch, my mom said they hadn't expected me to arrive with such big news. She said it lightly, like it explained everything, the cold welcome, the questions, Angela's unannounced visit. My dad, caught between awkward and sincere, turned to Alec and asked if he'd join him and Dylan for a spring fishing trip. Alec looked up from his plate and said sure, if his shifts allowed. Dylan raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. They still hadn't apologized. No one owned up to anything, but they were shifting. My mom wasn't forcing smiles anymore. She was just still, observing. My dad wasn't cracking jokes about commitment or being too busy for love. There was no warmth in the air, but there wasn't rejection either. The room had changed its climate. Later, while I dried dishes, my mom came over and asked to see the ring again. This time, it wasn't a test. She just wanted a better look. I slid it off and handed it to her. She held it under the kitchen light, nodded, and gave it back without a word. While cleaning the counter, she asked if we'd send holiday cards next year. It wasn't about stationery. It was about permanence. I said probably. That was enough. Alec had to leave that evening. He had an early shift in Boston and needed to hit the road before dark. We carried his bag to the car together. No one followed us out. He promised to meet me on the 28th as planned. We kissed goodbye, brief and private. I turned back and saw my mom watching through the window. She didn't wave or smile, just stood there. A few hours later, as I zipped my last bag, she walked into the kitchen and handed me a slice of pie in a container for the trip. She didn't say more. She'd only ever done that for Ellie. I packed my things slowly. No one hurried me. Dylan passed by the door, bag over his shoulder, and said next year they'd save a seat for Alec, not last minute. I nodded and snapped my suitcase shut. I pulled out of the driveway without anyone shouting reminders or asking about traffic. The porch light stayed on, but the curtains didn't stir. On the drive back, it hit me. No one called me single. No one asked when I'd settle down. No one made me the punchline. They didn't embrace Alec because I asked them to. They didn't shower us with congratulations. But they didn't diminish me either. I left not as the cautionary tale, not as the one who couldn't get it right, not as the girl they pitted in whispers. This time, I left on my terms. Not their star, maybe, but definitely not their joke. I got back to Boston on the evening of the 27th. Alec picked me up from the station with a coffee and a small bundle of corner store flowers. We didn't talk much in the car, just sat in the quiet, city lights flickering across the windshield, the weight of the trip still tucked in my coat pockets. The next morning, I unpacked the pie my mom had sent and slid it into Alec's fridge. He chuckled and asked if I was going to eat it or frame it as a family heirloom. I said I hadn't decided yet. That afternoon, we took a walk in the public garden. It was chilly, but the sun was out. At one point, Alec stopped and asked if I wanted to pick a date, not for the wedding, but for telling his family. I said yes. We settled on February, after his sister's birthday, to avoid stealing anyone's thunder. Back at his place, I noticed a small stack of bridal magazines on his shelf. He hadn't mentioned them before, said a colleague gave them to him after hearing about the engagement. I picked one up, flipped it open, and found a checklist with venue, guest list, and family talk circled in blue ink. We ordered sushi that night and watched a movie we didn't finish. Around midnight, my phone lit up. A family group chat sparked to life. My dad sent a photo of the fishing gear he planned to prep for spring. Ellie followed with a message, "He's really joining you, huh?" I sent a thumbs up emoji and left it at that. The next day, I mailed my mom a New Year's card. Nothing elaborate, just a short note and a photo of Alec and me in the park. A week later, I got a card back. Inside was a brief line in her handwriting, "You two looked calm." By mid-January, Alec's parents invited me for dinner. It was uneventful in the best way. His mom piled on too much food, his dad asked about my work, and no one made sly remarks about timing, age, or independence. Back in my apartment, I started packing a few boxes. Alec and I hadn't officially said I was moving in, but we'd cleared space in his closet and added my name to his lease form. It was happening, quietly, steadily, without fanfare. I got a text from Dylan asking if Alec was still around. I sent a photo of Alec fixing my faucet and wrote, "Very much so." He replied, "Good, about time this family got an upgrade." No arguments, no subtle jabs, just progress, clean, forward, and long overdue.